I have the pleasure now of turning the floor over to this morning's presenter, Anthony Shop, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail around his background. You do have his short bio on the single pager. I want to give him ample of time because he's got a lot of ground to cover in a short amount of time. And I think the information, it's not that I think, I'm confident that the information that he's going to share with you all this morning is going to be a game changer for many of you in the room. And so I invite you to make sure you've got pen in hand to take lots of notes. Anthony is someone who I had the pleasure of just recently meeting. He's the co-founder of a DC-based company called Social Driver. So they help companies to connect with people. So he works with large organizations. He's also he's highly involved. Oh my gosh, I can't remember your title at the National Press Club.
Yeah.
He's someone who has a tremendous amount of respect, has been written up in the the Washington Post. So get to know Mr. Shop, follow his company, follow him, all those great things. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Anthony Shop.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. When we were talking to Kelly and Melissa and Tony, they said, we want you to be able to tell small businesses everything they need to know about social media, and you have 20 minutes. So I'm really excited to be up here this morning and to be in Montgomery County. Thanks for making the time to be here. One of the things I want to just tell you to prepare for today's presentation is I'm not going to go through a 101 and show you how to tweet or what a hashtag is or any of that. What I do want to do is show you something I've seen when I look at companies and associations and nonprofits that are really succeeding in the 21st century in marketing and in connecting with their customers and their members and their people. I think it's much more about a change of mindset in the 21st century than those tools. Tools are great, but what we really need to do is orient how we think about engaging with customers and using these tools, because that's really what's changed. So I'm going to talk about the big picture, some things I see companies doing that the successful companies have in common. And then I have a couple examples I do want to talk about of what some small businesses are doing that might just spark some ideas that we can all use for inspiration in our own companies. As Kelly mentioned, I started Social Driver along with my partner about 3.5 years ago. We're really proud that we've grown to a team of 25 people without taking on any outside investment or any debt. And we work with a real range of companies, from Honda and Salesforce to some of the largest associations and nonprofits in the world, to some startups and small businesses. So that's kind of just gives you some context of my experience and how I approach this. Let me advance here. So I think the first thing that I always want to start with is, we talk a lot about what we do, the type of work, because sometimes it's a website or it's a social media campaign. But beneath all of that, because who knows if websites are even going to be around in 20 years, right? I don't know. So why do we do this? Why are we doing this work, and why are you all here and interested in this topic today? I think it starts with vision. And the first part of that vision is one that I think you all will relate with. It's this idea that we think the future is bright. We are optimistic. And I know many of you started businesses. You work for small businesses. I don't think you'd be doing what you were doing if you weren't a little bit optimistic and thought that the future was bright. I think you'd probably find something else, right? Or you'd have a hard time getting up and being here to network before 8 a.m. So this idea that the future is bright is something that really inspires us. And I think today, when we think about why is the future bright, the future is not going to be better because somebody launched an app or because of a new intranet. It's what those things do. They allow people to connect, because people have had dreams forever, as long as people have been around, of things that we wanted to do that we couldn't figure out how to do. We couldn't figure out how to have a conversation with someone halfway around the world, or take something really exciting we're doing and share that with lots of people so they could have a conversation about it while they're walking down the street maybe, right? And now those things are possible. So when we think about marketing, when we think about social media, it's how can we connect people so that people can do things they've always wanted to do, but that weren't possible until now. And that's pretty exciting. I think to get there, it takes what I call a driver mentality. So many companies have this passenger mentality. They're on the sidelines and they say, I'm going to sit back. I'm going to just see what my competitors do, see what my peers do. I'm going to let them try things and make mistakes, and then maybe I'll learn from that and I can replicate what they're doing. I don't think that works very well in a fast-paced world, and I also think we owe it to ourselves and our customers and our communities to not do that and to say, why don't we try something? Why can't we be the first ones? Why can't we lead the way and try something new that no one's done before? So that's the mentality I think we have to embrace, and that let's embrace for this morning, this idea that the future is bright, progress is social, it's about connecting people to one another, and let's get there by trying things we haven't done before so that we can lead the way and we can be the first. And it may not be a huge thing, it may be just a small thing that we're the first on, but that's where things start. That's where this work gets really important. So how do you do that? Well, I think something that we find in this world and something that you can take back, whether you work for a huge company or whether you have a one-person shop, is how do we get to innovation? Innovation is not gradual. Innovation is not going to come out of a standing 30-minute meeting that you set up every Thursday for you and your team for the next 6 months. That's not going to lead to some breakthrough. But innovation pops. It happens with a burst of energy and intensity. And so one of the ways we've done that is developed pop-up innovation labs where we'll go into a company and say, let's take this one little project and treat it like a startup, and we're going to launch something in 6 weeks. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we're going to get something out there rather than trying to wait a year to get something that's perfect and missing an opportunity. And that's something you can do no matter where you work, no matter if you have your own business, is take one thing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can do that. But that's my challenge to you today, is to go back and take one thing and try to get some innovation to pop with that initiative that you're working on. So, companies that are successful in the 21st century, I think they're doing 3 things. I'm going to share those 3 things with you. The first thing, and probably the most important, is they recognize people, all of us, are writing real-time autobiographies of ourselves. And we're posting those autobiographies online. We're checking in, we're tweeting. You know, it used to be if somebody held up a camera like this, you might have thought they were taking a picture of what was in front of them. Now you know they're taking a selfie, right? They're doing this. That's what people are doing. That is the real-time autobiography that folks are writing. And so if you want to reach people with your brand, if you want to be successful in marketing and engagement, then you have to shift the mindset and say, my brand can't always be at the center, because it's going to be difficult for me to get everybody to talk about me and share what I want them to share about me. I got to make it about them. And so, speaking of that selfie analogy, this is the most retweeted tweet of all time. I know some folks who work at Samsung and were involved with this happening. Samsung was very involved with this, and this tweet broke Twitter temporarily. More than 2 million people retweeted this. And I think this is brilliant, because let's look at this from a different angle. If we zoom out here and see the picture of the selfie. Samsung is a character in this selfie. Samsung figured out there's probably nothing we can do to get people to just talk only about us and our product and our messaging separate from their lives. But we might be able to weave our product and to weave our story into the autobiography that someone else is writing. And we might be able to make ourselves a character in that selfie. And they did that. And it became the most retweeted tweet of all time that millions of people saw and newspapers wrote articles about. So ask yourselves, when you're working on your next marketing initiative, if you're trying to get folks to come to an event like this and you send an email blast, and then you send another email blast, and you say, gosh, we don't have enough people at this event. What should we do? Send a third email blast? No. Ask yourself, why would somebody who I want to be here, because you want people to tell their friends and invite their friends, how can I get them to allow me to be in their selfie? How can I get them to allow me to be part of their story? Why would they do that? And I find that if you can ask that question, you will change the conversation that you and your colleagues are having. You will shift the mentality to, yeah, it isn't all about us pushing in one direction. Because the old way was this broadcast mentality that everybody watched the same 3 channels, and if I just got on one of those channels, that was enough. I would interrupt enough people and enough people would see it. But now we know that is not sufficient because the world is really noisy. Times Square is the most expensive place, arguably, that you can try to pay to interrupt people with advertising and get your message out there. And there's still perhaps some value in that. But I love this photo because when we look at all this noise in Times Square and we zoom in, what we see here is this guy. He's in the middle of the picture at the bottom, and what he's doing is looking down at his phone like this. He's refusing to be interrupted by all of those expensive advertisements, and he's doing whatever he wants to do. He may be checking in. He may be taking a selfie with the billboards in the background to show his friends. He may be looking on Yelp to find out what's the best restaurant to eat in Times Square. Does anybody know? Don't eat in Times Square. That's the answer if you've ever been there. But what he's not doing is saying, oh, I wonder what those people want me to think. He's doing his stuff. I always say people are on a mission. Your customers are on a mission. And whether that mission is sitting down at the website, at their computer to do research, or pulling up an address on their phone to figure out how to get here this morning, they're on a mission. And if you aren't part of the mission and helping them accomplish it, then you're invisible. Then whatever money that you do spend, the resources that you do invest to get in front of them, you're not going to see a return on investment from that. You're not going to get enough back. That's the difference in the 21st century. You just can't pay to interrupt people the same way you could before. So I would say, as you think about these tools, don't think about them like a television. Don't think about social media and Twitter as a place for you to push the announcements that you posted to your website. Let's push that out on Twitter. I hear that sometimes. When I hear that push that language, that's a red flag for me. And when you hear that, that should be a red flag for you. We're not doing it right if we're using it to push information out there because it's like a telephone, not a television. These are tools that allow people to communicate back and forth, allow people to have conversations and facilitate them. And you can use these tools to help facilitate that and build those connections, not only between you and your workforce and your customers, but among your customers so that they feel loyal to you. Just like an event like this, where you come and you network, you feel closer to this organization. Kelly doesn't have time to have a 30-minute conversation with every single person today. She'd go nuts if she tried to do that. But she's part of building this community where you all have conversations, and then you remember who brought that together. You remember the groups that bring you together. So that's the mentality we have to take. The next thing that companies are doing after they realize, okay, people are writing real-time autobiographies, how do we get in their selfie, is they're also realizing we can't just copy what someone else is doing. It doesn't work. We have to innovate instead of replicate. And the reason is, even if you have a competitor or a peer that looks very similar to you, that company's strategy is different. That company's workforce is different. And that company's customer base is different. They may be subtle differences, but they're different. And so let me show you an example of this. This is something that happened in Korea. It's really cool. Has anybody seen this before? A couple people? So this is a couple years old. Tesco's Home Plus brand in Korea, they wanted to, so let's start through that kind of pattern I just went through, business strategy. We want to expand our market share without growing our footprint through home delivery. And they do same-day home delivery. So I can be in the subway station. They ran these advertisements. They're engaging. They're bright. They look like grocery shelves. That's the train that you get on. They're the panel before the train. And I can use my phone to scan this item, and I can have it delivered to me that night like a pizza. Well, why does this work? Well, one, it's visually engaging. It's cool. You want to scan that, right? It just kind of seems cool. More importantly, it solved a real problem. I don't have to go to the grocery store now. I get to skip that. I get 20 minutes of my life back. Hey, that's pretty cool. And the other thing about this is that the company is able to accomplish all of this without adding more footprint. It's able to grow market share without growing its physical footprint. So it aligns up with the business strategy. Last thing here is good mobile and social strategies, kind of like water. It fills a gap. They're not asking you to stop what you're doing and to divert attention to them. They're taking a minute or two that you're standing and you have nothing to do while you get on the train. And they're saying, hey, I'll give you something to do that's going to help you. So this works for a lot of reasons. This is innovation. And then you have folks see this and they say, we want to copy that. And so this is a version of this that was tried in DC with Peapod. Now, anybody have any thoughts about why this may not be the same thing as Korea? It's not interactive. It's not as bright. It's boring. Small. Okay. Number one, has anybody ordered Peapod before? It's a great service. Grocery delivery. It's not the same day. It doesn't solve my problem the same way, does it? I don't get it that night. Number two, I don't know if you can tell from the pictures where the placement is. This is the tunnel I walk through before I scan my card to get in the metro. This isn't an area that I stop and waste time and I'm waiting for something to do. This is an area that you don't really want to stop because there's probably people coming behind you and you might get run over. And it doesn't look as visually engaging. It doesn't really look like a grocery shelf. So I think this is a great example of why you can't replicate. You can use other folks' ideas for inspiration, what other companies are doing, but remember these three things. What's our company strategy? Well, in this case, it was the Korean brand wanted to grow market share without increasing its footprint. So they had a service offering that allowed people to order instantly. If you're CEO or if you go to a conference and sit next to a competitor that has an app and you find out and you go, gosh, maybe we need an app. Pause for a second and figure out how does that align to our business strategy? And maybe their business strategy is different. Maybe they paid for an app and it's actually not even helping their business strategy. They're just bragging about it because what else are you going to do now that you wasted the money on it, right? I see that a lot. So what's the business strategy? How's this going to affect my team and my workforce? Who's going to do this? Who's going to run this? Who's going to write these tweets that we're going to have on this Twitter account we just launched? Did we staff that? And then what's it mean for my customer? Is it really going to help my customer? I think the Korean example is a great example of helping a customer. I think this example is a lot more helpful to the company than to the customer. And that's the big difference for me. It's not really helping the customer. So we have to innovate instead of replicate by looking at those three things. And the third thing companies are doing that are succeeding in the 21st century is they recognize that culture has changed. They recognize 21st century tools like Twitter and mobile apps, they're great. 21st century tools are great, but they only work in the context of a 21st century culture. You can't launch a Twitter account and use your 1980s press release policy that takes 2 weeks to get something approved and goes through 8 people every tweet and expect that that's going to work. It's a great 21st century tool. It's not aligned with 21st century culture if you're doing it that way. If you're doing it that way, you're doing it wrong. It's not going to work for you. And more importantly, you're not going to see results from it. And I don't want you to use social media to waste time because I'm a fellow business owner. I want you to do things that are actually going to get your business a return so that we can continue to grow this community and make the place better and have jobs that are, have employees that can actually grow their careers, and wasting money on social media is not going to get you there. So we have to embrace the culture of today. We have to understand what people are doing, what our audience is doing, and then we have to connect with them in ways that are going to make a difference. If you have any doubt that the way we interact with the world has changed, let's just look at these 2 photos of the inauguration of Pope Benedict versus Pope Francis. In 2005, you see a crowd of people. Looks like you could have seen that any decade. And in the next inauguration, which is only 8 years later, everyone's looking at the world through a device. They're interacting with the world through pictures, through video, and they're sharing it. They're excited about it. They're telling their friends, I was here, I was a part of history. Your customers, I don't care who they are, I don't care how old they are, the way they interact with the world has changed. Even if they're not tweeting and sharing things all the time like their grandkids are, things have still changed. They probably have different devices. They probably have slightly different expectations. And so we need to understand that, and we need to align our company and what we're doing with what our audience and our customers are doing. So I say this is a great way to think about 21st century culture. What is 21st century culture, and how can I align my business with it? I think 21st century culture is like a sports car. It is flat, it is fast, it is fun. And those are 3 things that you can bring to one project in your business, if not your whole company. So flat, less hierarchical, fewer layers to go through. If you have that 8-level approval process, how can you change the process? Or how can you at least have some meetings where you get these people in the room at the same time so that you can expedite the process and you don't have to have 4 separate meetings. You get the decision makers there and you make a decision. That's what the companies that are succeeding in the 21st century are doing. Fast. They're not waiting a year. They're not putting an editorial calendar together for 18 months and planning, what they're going to do next Memorial Day in 2015. They're figuring out how to move more rapidly. And yes, there's long-term planning, but there's also much more agile, short-term execution. Because I'll tell you, it used to be if you were an airline, let's say, and you did something, had a problem with your company, you could run a full-page ad in the newspaper and say, we're sorry. And that made a connection with people, and they would say, oh, okay, that's a cool way for them to apologize to me. Now, I was on a flight, a Virgin America flight, had an issue. I had a credit issued to me over a Twitter chat before my flight took off. My expectations of customer service have changed. I'm not going to be satisfied with a letter a month from now. I want you to fix my problem now. So fast. And fun. What do I mean by fun? I think in a world where we are checking our personal Facebook and email at work from our phone, and we're checking our work email at night when we're at home, things are blending. And I think what it means is people expect us to be a little bit more like humans, expect us to match the tone of the conversation, sometimes expect us to be a little less formal. So that's what I mean by fun. And it also means when you're working on a project with your team, sometimes you can do something to spice it up. I found that playing a fun music playlist during a meeting about a special project sometimes changes the entire tone of the meeting and the project. It's just a little bit of fun. Just a little bit. So flat, fast, and fun. So just to wrap up on those things, the 3 things that companies are doing in the 21st century, big companies, small companies, nonprofits, and that you can do to embrace where things are going and to succeed in engaging and connecting with your customers is 1, recognize your customers are writing real-time autobiographies of themselves. So put people at the center and ask that question. Why would they want me and my brand to be in their selfie? If you can ask that question, you can use that for inspiration, it will take you a very long way toward where you need to go. The second is recognize your company, your workforce, and your customers all are very different from your competitors and your peers. So you have to innovate instead of replicate. Use other ideas for inspiration, absolutely, but don't just copy them. Relate them to your strategy so that they're yours. And finally, 21st century tools are great, they're fantastic, but they only work in 21st century culture. So embrace that culture. See what your customers are doing. Align yourself with that culture. Now let me show you a few examples of things some companies are doing that I thought might spark some ideas. If I told you that I paid $26 for a bag of marshmallows, you'd probably think I was crazy. But, and Allie from my team is here, this is a secret because Boris on our team is getting married in 2 weeks. And when we found out he told us his favorite food is marshmallows, we thought, having pictures of Boris and Lisa on marshmallows as a wedding gift, that might be pretty cool. And this company is getting a lot of attention. Kate Middleton's brother, this is London-based, actually founded this company, Boomf. And they take your Instagram pictures and they put them on marshmallows. What better example of becoming part of someone's selfie, letting them put the selfies on the marshmallows? I just think this is a really cool idea. I don't know what you can do with it at your business, but it might spark something. It's getting a lot of attention. Second is, my husband and I were up in Philadelphia, and here's a little exchange that happened. He checked in on Foursquare, and he said, I'm at the 30th Street station. And his friend Luke said, while you're there, go to McGillen's, which is a bar. And before we even left the station, they wrote back to him and said, great idea, we've got a nice cold McGillen's 1860 IPA waiting for you. Even a small business, and we see a lot of companies doing this, when folks check in at a train station, the aquarium tweets at them and says, hey, if you have time, you should come over. Maybe there's a promotion. Maybe they just, price promotions can be good, but you know what's even better? People respond to looking good and feeling good and you validating their existence and their story. So connecting with people in that way is something that your business, no matter what size, may be able to do. You may be able to connect with them around what they care about and what they're doing. That was a fun example. And the last, has anybody eaten at Mr. Yogato? Yes, yeah, it's great. I love this place. It's a yogurt place in DC. I've been going there for years. I think they have multiple locations, but they have one kind of near my house in DC. And they have this crazy stuff. They have these crazy rules. If you eat there every day for 30 days, you become a 30-day champion. You end up on this whiteboard. If you answer trivia questions like, I think last time it was 4 South American countries that are going to be playing in the World Cup, they'll give you 5% off, all this stuff. You get 10% off if you will allow them, I don't know if you can see in the picture, to stamp your forehead with a Mr. Yogato stamp. Now let's think about this. A cup of yogurt's like $4. They give you 40 cents off for doing this. And dozens, hundreds of people actually do this. And not only do they do it, they post the picture on social media about it. This company has figured something out. If you can get people excited, if you can make the experience about them, they might do it. They might tell their friends. They've been doing this type of sort of social media sharing before social media existed. A stamp is sort of like a physical like that you carry around with you on your forehead. And now you have folks that are sharing that on social media. I think this is a great example of becoming part of someone's real-time autobiography. How much they love that company. They'll brand themselves with it. Embracing that culture and innovating, doing something a little differently than everybody else. So with that, I'd love to take any questions you have. I want to just conclude by saying this. Whether you're an independent business owner, whether you work at a bank or a university or a large company or in the government, I think you can take this. And I really challenge you to do it. Take these ideas, bring them back on your next project, your next initiative. You don't have to change everything overnight. Take one thing you're doing and say, can we make this flat? Can we make this a little faster? Can we make this a little more fun? Can we ask that question, why would our customer want us to be in their selfie? And see where that takes you. And I predict that you'll start to align yourself with what's happening in the 21st century, and you'll find ways to use social media and digital tools to succeed in your business. Thanks for having me this morning.